who traditionally thought about divorce and gone about divorce should change or should really be rethought?
I think that's such a good question. I'm doing this work because I think if we make a change in the way people divorce, then their children are impacted in a very positive way, in a much better way. In this model, we say, show your parenting agreement to your children because you created something for them that will make them proud of you. Whereas in the court, by the way, they stamp it and say, under no circumstances should your children see this document. And we build on strength so that instead of children growing up and making bad decisions themselves, I think we have a chance to really change our culture, our society, because families should never end up warring with each other. They shouldn't be in court fighting each other. They need to be able to create the future for themselves and their children and have a clear vision of what that needs to be.
Licensed clinical social worker Nancy Ross. She's a counselor, a therapist who works with the collaborative divorce process. My guest, Karen Klein, she's an artist who uses, among other mediums, photography. She has done simply a phenomenal project, Karen. Broken Circle, Children of Divorce and Separation. I want to thank you so much for coming on Mindset. What are your final thoughts about this, just to wrap this up for us?
Well, I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk about my project, and I'm very grateful for all of the kids who participated. I had 50 of them now in my book, and I felt honored that they trusted me with their stories, and I'm very happy that I can share that with you and your audience.
Karen Klein, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Mindset. I'm your host, James Curtis. You're listening to Mindset, mental health news and information. Our topic today, kids. We're talking about divorce and children, giving children a voice in the process. I had an initial conversation, the first part of the show, with Karen Klein. She's an artist who uses the visual medium of photography. Broken Circle, please check it out. It is a wonderful piece of work, and all of the websites that we referred to during my conversation and that we referred to throughout the show, on all of our shows, as a matter of fact, you can find on our Facebook page for Mindset, mental health news and information. That's at facebook.com/mindset show page. And you can look for some extended interview material on the collaborative divorce segment as of tomorrow. We're going to add some of that stuff that we didn't get a chance to broadcast last week. But on to the second portion of our show. Mercedes Samudio is a parent coach, and here's how she describes what she does.
I named my company The Parenting Skill because I believe that parenting is not an inherent trait that we're all born with, but I believe that's a skill that we all develop as we have our own children and as we interact with other children. What I do with my families and with my parents and my company is I focus on 1 to 2 behaviors at a time that parents are feeling is really kind of creating a lot of tension and dysfunction in their families. And I focus on giving the parents language to help them with their children's behavior, effective parenting skills, so that way they can continue to manage that behavior. And I also focus on the development of the parent-child relationship.
I asked Mercedes, who, as you can hear, has an intensity and a passion for the work that she does that impressed me as a no-nonsense approach to coaching parents, and that alone is empowering. I asked her to describe the overall approach.
I named my what I do look at how we're raising our children. My larger framework is that we're raising another human being, and we're raising another human being to be able to take care of themselves and to advocate for themselves once they're no longer under our care. So I use that framework a lot of the time. And then I also look at the relationship between the parent and the child as the foundation for everything else that we put on the child or on the family. When we look at our relationships, like our coworkers, our spouses, our significant others, our friends, they all kind of have a foundation for what we can do with them and what we can't do with them. So like with our bosses, we know that we probably can't go to a nightclub and get drunk with our bosses, right? We still have a relationship with them, but there's a certain level or a certain foundation that we have with them. I feel like the parent-child relationship has those same foundations and those same limits and boundaries. And I think that once you figure out what your relationship is with your child, then you know the things that you can do with them, the things that maybe won't be so effective with them, and the things that will really kind of help flourish them as a human being. So what I do with families, like I said, is coaching. So coaching in itself is more directive. It's less focused on the past issues and more focused on the present issues with the family and how those present issues are going to affect the future of that family.
So those are some of the differences between, say, for example, traditional counseling or therapy and coaching, that directive. Here's what you need to do, some tool specifics as to how to intervene in the dynamic that's going on in the family. And here's some more about those mechanics.
So what families do is they call me. We schedule a free parent power session, which is like that free introductory session where I get a good overview of what is going on in the home and what some of the major issues are occurring in the home to kind of create all the tension that initially led the family to, or the parent to call me. Once we establish what the main issues are, and again, I like to focus on 1 to 2 initially, and initially those are the most dysfunctional issues that are going on. So the kid is hitting, the kid is biting, the kid may be experimenting or doing drugs, just things that are really huge in the family that are creating a lot of tension I like to focus on initially. And we talk about a number of sessions, that we can really work on this behavior solely and not focus on everything else. Just really focus on what's going on in the family, what's going on for the child as these behaviors are manifesting, what's going on for the parent as they're watching their child experience these behaviors, and really get a good sense of how the family can help that child decrease those behaviors.
So to get my mind around what a coaching session with Mercedes Samudio might actually be like, I talked to her about a situation that actually happened to me. My oldest daughter, who now is 25, she's not going to like this part, but when she was 10, she started stealing. And I asked Mercedes to give me some feedback as to how I handled that situation and what I might have done, how I might have improved on what I did to intervene and try to arrest that, no pun intended, arrest that behavior, and whether or not I did any irreparable I did any damage to the poor child. Now, so here's what happened. Let me give you the backstory. When my daughter, who was 10 years old. It started out, she took, on the one occasion that we saw it, a small piece of candy. You know those loose bulk candy barrels that wrapped candy in a grocery store? So we busted her. We caught her in the act. We made her apologize on the spot to the manager, took away some privileges temporarily. So Few days, a week or so goes by. A friend of hers is over the house. She takes her best friend, again, both 10-year-olds, same age little girls, her friend's brand new $2 bill. Remember those $2 bills that they printed out a while back? So this time we did the same basic approach, made her apologize, punishment, followed by a stern lecture. Then the final straw for me was when she pocketed a latex glove out of the home of an elderly friend of ours that we were visiting. And again, this isn't big stuff, but for me, I was livid. I was embarrassed. And not only was I ashamed in front of my elderly friend, at the time, I was a prosecutor. I was a deputy district attorney who sent people to jail for stealing stuff. So, and I think that looking back on it more than anything, I was scared. I was a little scared for my daughter. I mean, I thought she was a good kid. She is a good kid. Let me take that back completely. She's a very good kid. She's a nice little girl, but this conduct was very troubling. And I have to think about, what does this mean and portend for her future? So one impulse was to do what my grandmother used to do to me, which was pull the switch out, but I didn't. I resisted. But this time, in addition to the apology and all the rest of it, I imposed on a buddy of mine. He was a huge doorway of a police officer to come, arrest her. Now, I let a few days pass. My cop buddy, his name is Brian, he parks his black and white patrol car in front of our house. So she comes home from school and Brian stays in his car. She comes home, she goes upstairs, puts her stuff away. Brian then comes, knocks on the door. I call out to my daughter, sweetheart, somebody's here for you. My wife and I hide and watch as the two horrible parents that we were. And truthfully, it was all we could do to keep from laughing because she was terrified. Now, Brian talks to her about stealing, about what happens to people who steal. My daughter appears to be in shock and on the verge of tears, although she's still managing to hold it together. And that is until Brian has her stand up, turn around, put her hands behind her back, and click, click. He puts the handcuffs on her, marches her out to the back of his patrol car. He doesn't take her anywhere, doesn't drive away. He keeps her in the back seat of the car for what must have seemed like an interminable period of time. He brings her back in the house. Now tears are flowing, streaming down her cheeks. She apologizes, makes a beeline for her room, and at least as far as we know, no more stealing, and she's graduated from college and doing good stuff now. So I asked Mercedes, how'd I do?
What I would start off with was saying that I really actually think that you did a pretty good job at dealing with the initial idea of stealing. So the initial thing was her stealing a piece of candy, which, again, I think you dealt with it in a really effective way. You took her to say sorry back to the store manager. You made her take the candy back. You explained to her some of the consequences of stealing. You explained to her why you do what you do as a prosecutor, which I think helps a little bit, like you said, going into her morality and helping her to understand right versus wrong. The issue, I think, where some of that break might have come in for her doing maybe another time was helping her to understand what her motivations were for stealing in the first place. So stealing for a lot of children is this idea that I need something that my parent or my caregiver is not going to get for me, so I'm going to get it myself. Most kids don't understand long-term consequences. So what you initially did, giving her the idea of those long-term consequences, was stored in her wonderful little logical brain, but it wasn't in her emotional part where I want what I want when I see it. So I think what I would say for the long term for you is maybe helping to understand, maybe you getting a really good understanding of what her motivations are for stealing.
And unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it right there. You can find the rest of my discussion with Mercedes Samudio on the podcast portion. We're going to upload that later on this evening, so check back tomorrow for the rest of that interview. It is phenomenal. You're really going to enjoy it. I want to thank all of my guests, Mercedes Samudio, Karen Klein, and Nancy Ross. You can find, all of the links to the stuff that we refer to on our Facebook page. We tweet at the handle at Mindset Show. Next week, a lot of news recently about violence against women on college campuses. We talked to two experts. Until then, I'm James Curtis for Mental Health Mindset, Mental Health News and Information. Dare to see mental health differently. Keep up the fight.